The year is 1389, and Sultan Murat I lay dead on the Kosovo field. As Shehzade Bayezid returned to the Ottoman camp after pursuing the retreating Serbian army, he got news that his father was assassinated. Knowing that he had to act fast to seize the throne, Bayezid sprung into action and quickly dealt with his brother Shehzade Yaqub, who he had strangled once he returned to the Ottoman camp, in order to prevent a civil war. The following day, Bayezid would be proclaimed as the new Sultan by the Ottoman army, or whatever was left of it. The Ottoman kingdom was in huge trouble. Even though they had won the Battle of Kosovo, the Ottomans lost a majority of their army and lost their Sultan during the engagement. This sudden weakness prompted some Christian lords to seek resistance against the Ottomans all around the kingdom. Even after the Battle of Kosovo, many Serbian lords had not submitted to the Ottomans and resisted against them at every opportunity. Serbian lords like Vuk Brankovic, the same lord that left the Battle of Kosovo early, was still resisting Ottoman presence in the region. There was a serious concern that this rebellious nature would spread around to other Christian subjects around the empire due to a lack of strong Ottoman authority caused by the devastation of the Ottoman army at Kosovo. The Ottomans also made many enemies abroad too. Europe was starting to get concerned with the Ottoman expansion into Europe, and talks of starting up a crusade against the Ottomans were in the air, which was concerning for Bayezid, who knew his kingdom wasn't ready for such war. Even the Turkish beyliks in Anatolia were wavering their loyalty to the Ottomans after the death of Murad. They started to resist Ottoman presence in the region, especially the Karaman Turks, who even started launching raids into the Ottoman kingdom, while Bayezid was preoccupied in Europe. The Bey of the Karamans, Alaaddin Ali, the same Bey that Murad fought a couple years ago, declared war on Bayezid and started forming an anti-Ottoman alliance among the beyliks in Anatolia. This was the kingdom that Bayezid inherited from his father. Before going to face the Karamans in Anatolia, Bayezid first had to stabilize the Balkans under his control. First, he installed the 12-year-old son of Prince Lazar, Stefan Lazarević, to the throne of Serbia as a puppet prince. Many Serbian nobles, out of respect to the late Prince Lazar, accepted Stefan Lazarević as his successor, which stabilized situations for Bayezid in Serbia. Also, to gain legitimacy and authority over the newly vassalized kingdom of Serbia, Bayezid married the daughter of Prince Lazar, Princess Olivia Despina. This practice of vassalizing Christian kingdoms and demanding yearly tribute from them was much easier than full-on conquest of these lands, which Bayezid didn't have the strength to do at the moment. He planned on annexing these small kingdoms after he gathered the strength of the Ottoman army, but for now, he had to accept their tributes. Not having enough time to deal with the rebellious Serbian lord Vuk Brankovic, Bayezid sent out Pasha Yigit Bey to capture the key city of Skopje, which he would do by 1391. Vuk Brankovic became a Serbian vassal after the fall of Skopje. After buying some time in Europe, Bayezid started his march to Anatolia to fight off the Karamans. Along the way, Bayezid secured fatwas, or legal rulings from Islamic scholars, justifying his war against the Muslim Anatolian states, since it was frowned upon for Muslims to fight other Muslims in the Islamic world. This was a huge break from Turkish Ghazi tradition that Bayezid's ancestors followed, who tended to fight only non-Muslim kingdoms. Also, along the way, Bayezid had to restructure his remaining army, who were mostly Turks from those Anatolian beyliks that he was in war with, and whose loyalty might come into question during the military campaign to come. Bayezid left the majority of his army's Turkoman warriors and relied instead on his own retinue of troops and vassal troops from Serbia and the Byzantines for the upcoming war. The coastal beyliks had shifted their allegiance to the Karaman Turks after the death of Murad I, so during the summer of 1390, Bayezid managed to defeat the beyliks of Aydin, Saruhan, and Menteşe in a single military campaign. Hearing of these defeats, Alauddin Ali decided to ally himself with the Intranids, Jandars, Hamids, Tekka, and the Germanids, who were also starting to get concerned with the aggressive expansionist Sultan Bayezid. During the winter of 1390, Bayezid would launch surprise attacks against these beyliks and even capture the city of Konya from the Karamans. The Hamids, Tekka, and the Germanids were all annexed, and Karaman became a vassal to Bayezid. Bayezid resumed his campaign in 1391, where he would launch invasions against Jandar and the Intranids. Jandar submitted quickly to Bayezid, but the Intranids still resisted against the Ottomans. Bayezid sent out his son Şehzade Ertuğrul to fight against the Intranids during the summer of 1391, but the military campaign ended in disaster, which saw the death of Şehzade Ertuğrul during the Battle of KIRKDILIM against the Bey of the Intranids, Kadı Burhan al-Din. Even after this defeat, Bayezid's campaigns into Anatolia were a resounding success. The Ottomans gained much needed manpower for its military and wealth for its war-torn economy. Bayezid's lightning-fast campaign into Anatolia stabilized situations for the Ottoman kingdom in the region. Back in Europe, things also seemed to cool off. The Serbian princes and nobles seemed to have submitted to Bayezid after his victories in Anatolia, and talks of rebellion stopped. The two Bulgarian kings seemed loyal for the moment too, but in 1393, Bayezid learned of a secret alliance that was being formed between Bulgaria and the Kingdom of Hungary. Realizing that he needed to take action before Hungary went to war with him, Bayezid launched a military campaign into Bulgaria. Bayezid sent out his son Süleyman Çelebi to siege the Bulgarian capital of Tarnovo during the spring of 1393. King Ivan Shishman of Bulgaria watched from his fortress from Nicopolis as his capital surrendered. Most of the Bulgarian kingdom was annexed after the fall of Tarnovo. King Ivan Shishman would be executed by the Ottomans in 1395 when Nicopolis fell to Bayezid 2 years later. The Bulgarian ruler Vidin watched in horror as his half-brother's kingdom was annexed by Bayezid, so he quickly submitted to Ottoman rule. Also during this time, Bayezid resumed his aggressive expansionist plans onto the Balkans, where he would annex Thessaly and vassalize a couple of Albanian princedoms to the west. Even after a couple of raids into Bosnia and Wallachia, both kingdoms became vassals and started paying tribute to Bayezid. Within a few years of ascending to the throne, Bayezid took a kingdom that was on the brink of collapsing and transformed it to a kingdom that was thriving on conquests. The Ottoman kingdom might have been a growing state, but it was still split in half. The Byzantines had always been a thorn in the back of the Ottomans due to the fortress capital of Constantinople blocking easy passage through the Bosphorus Strait for the Ottomans. Ever since the ascension of Bayezid onto the Ottoman throne, relations with the Byzantines and the Ottomans were strained. While Bayezid was busy during his Anatolian campaign during 1390, Emperor John V started repairing the Theodosian walls which surrounded Constantinople. The walls had repulsed many invaders like the Sassanids, the Arabs, and the Kievan Rus during its almost 1,000-year-old history. Only once were the walls breached, and that was during the Fourth Crusade by the Latins, but that was more through scheming and plotting rather than siegecraft. Bayezid couldn't let the Byzantines build their fortifications, so he threatened to siege Constantinople if John V didn't stop the repairing of the walls. The powerless John V accepted Bayezid's demands, but the late emperor died in 1391 after 50 years of ruling the Byzantines. John V would be succeeded by his son Manuel II, who quickly started to reject Bayezid's new demands for increased tribute and establishment of a Muslim quarter in Constantinople. Bayezid responded by sieging Constantinople until Manuel II finally accepted Bayezid's new terms. The Byzantine state was a shadow of its former self. The once great empire that spanned across the Mediterranean Sea was reduced to a few holdings in Greece and the city of Constantinople at the mercy of the Ottomans. The desperate emperor Manuel II started to ask Europe for help against Bayezid in 1395. In retaliation, Bayezid would besiege Constantinople again. The Kingdom of Hungary was one of the strongest kingdoms in Europe. King Sigismund of Hungary was concerned by recent Ottoman successes right next to his kingdom, so he began talks with MIRCEA I of Wallachia, an Ottoman vassal, in the hopes of forming an alliance against his overlord. Just like Bulgaria, Bayezid heard about these secret talks of an alliance and decided to march on Wallachia. Bayezid called forth his Serbian vassals to join him on his military campaign to test their loyalty to him. All the princes joined, including the Serbian prince Stefan Lazarevic. The only Serbian lord not to answer the call was the dubious Vuk Brankovic, who refused to fight for Bayezid. After the Wallachian campaign, Bayezid would arrest Vuk Brankovic and gave away his lands to the loyal prince Stefan Lazarevic. Vuk Brankovic would die in captivity in 1397 in an Ottoman prison. In late 1394, Bayezid crossed the Danube into Wallachian territory. MIRCEA I of Wallachia led a guerrilla style of warfare against Bayezid's army for a couple of months until the Wallachian army faced the Ottoman army during the Battle of Rovine. The Wallachians won a hard-fought victory over the Ottomans at Rovine, which saw heavy casualties on both sides. Serbian princes that fought along with Bayezid, Marko Miranovic and Konstantin Dejanovic, both died during the battle, and their lands were annexed by the Ottomans after the battle. MIRCEA I had won a huge victory against the Ottomans, but he knew the Ottomans would be back soon. King Sigismund of Hungary called for a crusade on the Ottomans following Rovine. The European world was in utter chaos during this time period. The 100 Years' War between France and England raged on in Western Europe, and at the same time, the Papal Schism had divided the Christian world, which saw two popes claim power at the same time. Since France and England signed a truce a couple years ago, and both popes from Rome and Avignon supported the crusade, Sigismund found many allies in Europe. Small contingents from England, France, Burgundy, Castile, Aragon, Scotland, Venice, Genoa, Portugal, Bohemia, Poland, and the Knights Hospitaller were sent to King Sigismund, who gathered his troops at Buda. MIRCEA I of Wallachia also joined the crusading army, which at this point numbered around 16,000 to 25,000 men. The Crusader army split into three contingents. King Sigismund led a sizable army down to Vidin and attacked the Ottomans from the west, while MIRCEA led an army through Wallachia to attack the Ottomans from the north. The third contingent was from Genoa, the Knights Hospitaller, and from Venice, and they sailed past the Bosphorus Strait into the Danube River, bringing with them war and supply ships. The objectives of the crusade were unclear, but it seemed like the restoration of the Bulgarian Empire and lifting the siege of Constantinople and potentially kicking out the Ottomans out of the Balkans were on the checklist for the Crusaders. King Sigismund led his portion of the Crusader army to capture the city of Vidin, which was controlled by the Bulgarian king Ivan Stracimir, who was a vassal to Bayezid. When the Crusader army reached Vidin, King Ivan Stracimir opened his gates to the Crusaders and allowed them to massacre the local Ottoman garrison in the city. The Bulgarian king had no intentions for fighting for the Ottomans in the hopes of regaining Bulgaria back from Bayezid. Meanwhile, to the east, MIRCEA's army and the Crusader fleet arrived at Nicopolis and started to siege the fortress. Nicopolis was one of the most important Lower Danube fortresses due to its massive fortifications and its location from which the Crusaders could conduct military operations into deeper Bulgaria. But the Crusaders lacked any siege equipment, so they prompted to starve out the fort with a long siege. King Sigismund's army started their march towards Nicopolis to meet up the rest of the Crusader army, but along the way, logistical problems became apparent for the Crusaders. The Crusaders had not brought enough supplies for a long campaign, which meant that the army resorted to raiding and looting local farmlands and towns. This would hinder the speed and effectiveness of the Crusader army due to the lack of provisions and soldiers cargoing loot. There was also a lack of unity and a lack of a command structure in the Crusader camp. A great portion of the Crusader army was from France, and they tended to act independently from King Sigismund, which was seen during the sack of Ojehova. The city of Ojehova offered to surrender to King Sigismund, who accepted their offer, but the French contingent under John of Burgundy decided to sack the city anyways. Hundreds of Orthodox Christians and Muslim settlers were massacred by the Crusaders, and thousands were imprisoned in the hopes of ransoming them off for profit later on. By early September, King Sigismund had met up with MIRCEA and the Crusader fleet at Nicopolis. One could imagine the discontent in the Crusader camp after MIRCEA hearing that thousands of his Orthodox brethren were brutalized by his fellow Crusaders. While all of this was happening, Bayezid and his army was besieging Constantinople. Bayezid, learning of the Crusader invasion up to the north, directed all Ottoman forces in the Balkans to move south to Plovdiv and Edirne. Prince Stefan Lazarevich also joined Bayezid, and the pair marched up to the besieged fortress of Nicopolis with lightning speed. The Ottoman army was still recovering from the Battle of Kosovo, which was only 7 years ago, and a large portion of the army was still in Anatolia. This meant Bayezid's army was quite smaller than previous Ottoman hosts. This also meant that Bayezid could quickly assemble his army and quickly march on Nicopolis to catch the Crusaders off guard. With the addition of troops supplied from his Balkan vassals, Bayezid's army numbered around 15,000 to 20,000 men. The Crusader army was alarmed at Bayezid's sudden mobilization and the lightning speed of the Ottoman army. The siege of Nicopolis was lifted, and the Christian army began preparations for the upcoming battle. During the night before the huge engagement, the Crusader army was able to destroy an Ottoman scouting party, which raised the morale of the Crusaders. The Crusader army also began executing their prisoners that they captured along the way to Nicopolis as a demonstration of force for the Ottomans to see. Even though morale was very high in the Crusader camp, there was no unity to be found. King MIRCEA demanded that his Wallachian host to fight in the vanguard, since they had the most experience in fighting the Ottomans. King Sigismund favored MIRCEA's plan and also agreed on sending out infantry to scout out the heavily forested area around the Ottoman camp, but the French knights protested at this idea. The French knights were furious with the idea of entering the battlefield behind the so-called peasant Wallachian army, and accused King Sigismund of trying to steal the glory and honor in battle away from them. After all night fighting about battle plans, King Sigismund submitted to French demands. The following morning, on the 25th of September, the Crusader army was ready for battle. The Battle of Nicopolis had just begun. Disregarding King Sigismund's order of keeping the Crusader army together, the French knights on horseback in command of John of Burgundy begun the battle by charging towards the Ottoman camp. The French knights saw a group of Ottoman Akinji raiders in the plain ahead of the forest and proceeded to charge them. During this pursuit, the French knights left behind the rest of the Crusader army led by King Sigismund, who was in command of mostly foot infantry, which meant that they couldn't keep up with the French knights on horseback. The faster Ottoman Akinji horsemen lured the heavily armed French knights uphill, in which the French knights were showered by arrows from the Ottoman archers positioned on top of the hill. The Ottoman archers had placed stakes all around their position on top of the hill, which meant that the French knights were stuck and couldn't engage the Ottoman archers head-on. The European knights might have been heavily armored, but the horses weren't. Many stallions were impaled, and many threw their riders, killing them in the process. Some dismounted knights had broken through the stakes and started to slash through the lightly armored Ottoman archers. The Crusaders managed to rout these units, and some knights even believed that they had defeated Bayezid, so they started pursuing the routing Ottoman troops instead of waiting to regroup with King Sigismund, who was still trying to catch up with them. Little did the French knights know, but Bayezid only had sacrificed his conscripts to lure the Crusaders into his trap. Seconds later, Ottoman spies flanked the French Crusaders on both sides, while Bayezid sent out his personal guard into the center in attempts of surrounding the French knights. King Sigismund saw what was happening to the French knights, so he pushed up his forces up the hill to relieve the encircled French knights. Just as this was happening, the Akanjis from the start of the battle started to outflank King Sigismund from behind. The entire Crusader army was surrounded by all sides. The Wallachian portion of the army, led by MIRCEA, managed to break out from the encirclement, but decided to withdraw from the battle, knowing all was lost. Bayezid, knowing the battle was won, sent out Stefan Lazarevich and his Serbian knights to finish off the Crusaders for once and for all. The Crusader army started to crumble, and King Sigismund's portion of the army also escaped the encirclement and started to head for the Crusader fleet on the Danube River in order to withdraw from the battle. It became evident that there was not enough boats to carry the entire Crusader host, so panic set in as many soldiers scrambled onto the tightly spaced ships. Many drowned and many more were killed by the pursuing Ottoman cavalry. King Sigismund barely got onto a boat himself during the huge panic. Meanwhile, the exhausted French knights that were encircled surrendered to Bayezid. The battle was over. Sultan Bayezid had won a huge victory over the Christian realm at Nicopolis. Bayezid, being outraged by the massacres conducted by the Crusader army before the battle, ordered the massacre of most of the Crusader prisoners captured during the battle. Thousands were killed and the remainder were enslaved. Only a few noblemen like John of Burgundy were able to buy their freedom by paying a huge ransom to Bayezid. The Ottoman decisive victory over the Crusaders at Nicopolis increased European fears of the Ottomans while increasing Ottoman prestige throughout the Islamic world. In response to the victory at Nicopolis, thousands of Muslims around the Middle East began to flood into Anatolia in order to live in Ottoman lands or enter Bayezid's service. Sultan Bayezid I truly became a celebrity in the Islamic world after his victory at Nicopolis. Sultan Bayezid I was the most ambitious sultan to rule the Ottoman state yet. He often talked about marching on Rome itself and conquering all of Europe, which shows how ambitious the Sultan really was. Prior to Bayezid, the early Ottoman sultans were multi-layered rulers, being able to balance governing and martial responsibilities. Bayezid, however, was a soldier first and gave most of his governing responsibilities to his grand viziers and ministers. The Thunderbolt was at the height of his power and prestige, but all big storms come to an end, and Bayezid was no different. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video. This has been Ege from the Ottoman History Hub, signing out.